They're expensive. And my experience has been, I've had a couple of clients try it, and they go out to different companies, and they get different dollar amounts being offered to them. So, there seems to be some negotiation available here. Social lending. Anybody ever looked at Prosper? Oh, I've got a fresh group here. Okay. Social lending is peer-to-peer lending, no bank involved. Think of, for example, this is an offshoot of micro-lending. It began where you made small loans, typically to third world countries, and typically to women. You would make a loan of $100 to a woman who's the center of the family, and if she is able to use that $100 to improve the business, the family is going to benefit from that. Micro-lending, a gentleman won a Nobel Prize for this, has now come to the United States. And Prosper is one of the biggest proponents of this. You go on Prosper, you can borrow up to $25,000 by making a pitch on there and having people contribute to your loan. Now these contributions, if you ever see them, are $50 or $100. So if I'm looking for $25,000, I got to get a lot of people to kick in. I have 10 days to get the loan funded, and if it funds in 10 days, Prosper cuts the transaction off, disperses the money to me, and I repay electronically. And all these guys that invested $50 or $100 get repaid through that process. You can do two things in there. You can be a lender or a borrower. If you're interested in being a lender, by the way, the interest rates are much higher than you're going to get anywhere else. So, first group I ever saw doing this were a bunch of Gator graduates. Believe it or not, they actually had a team that did it. So you can take a look at this. They're not, Prosper's not the only one. They're probably the largest one. Lending Club. Kiva now has a, Kiva.org has a social lending network in the United States now. Really interesting way to do it. Basically, you pitch yourself to other people. Prosper does check your credit and requires certain information from you. Then other people want to invest in you, they can. Okay. Easy to medium way to borrow money is equipment. Again, if I want to buy equipment, I go to a guy who sells equipment, not to the bank. Why? Because when I go to a guy who sells equipment, if he's able to get me financed, he gets a sales commission, which means he's working for me. Try that at the bank. The bank officer typically does not get any kind of commission for making you a loan, so we're not necessarily on your side. Difficult, small business loan. Bring up the next screen. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. This actually shows you, I got my screens out of order. This is Entrepreneur Magazine's Hot 500 Companies for 2007. Shows you how they finance their startup. You'll notice savings, biggest one, friends and families, bank loans and lines of credit. Those are forms of bank loans. Private investors, those are angel investors. Credit cards. And venture capital was the smallest one. Now, somewhere in there we lost a couple of screens in translation. So let me say what would have been. Why are small business loans difficult? Well, number one, you walk into a bank and you say, Pete, I'm here to talk to you about a high-risk situation. All right. Risk, banking, risk, banking. You don't like those two words in the same sentence. The loan officer that you come to talk to doesn't have the authority to make your loan, approve your loan at all. It's got to go before a committee, which means that people have got to get involved in there. There's paperwork to be done. There's a business plan to be generated, all sorts of things that have to go on. As one banker here in town tells me, don't bring me any problems either. If there are credit issues, collateral issues, get that straightened out before you come in to talk to me, because that's additional risk. I don't like risk. I've actually had a client last year who wanted to borrow money based on comic books, collector comic books. They were extremely valuable to this client, but I had to say this to him. If you were a bank loan officer, would you go to your boss and say, I just made a loan for our bank based on comic books? Would that be a career-enhancing move? So you need to think about this. Banks they like dirt, they like buildings, they like things with wheels on them, less. Restaurant equipment, one of my lenders gives 10% of the value of restaurant equipment. Why? Because so many restaurants fail, and it's easy to buy at an auction. So, So now you turn to me and you say, well, what's the bank going to look for? Well, the bank's going to look for what it calls the 5 C's. Okay? The first one's going to be credit, easy to understand. Second one's going to be collateral. What do you got? Which, by the way, we don't want in the bank, but we have to take in order to support the loan. Third thing, cash flow. I need it measured for 3 years into the future. Why? Because cash flow is the source of loan repayment. We can teach you how to do that, by the way. Fourth is capitalization. How much of your money is going to be invested in this business? Or, as the bankers frequently call it these days, skin in the game. You ever heard that term? That's what it means. How much of your money is going to be in this business at risk? Used to be we could get by with about 20%. Now 40% is off the limit. So 60% would be the maximum of the borrowings. Nobody does 100% loans. Last thing is conditions. That's what we think the prospects are for your particular business in this area. And then the bankers in Tallahassee will often inject a 6th C. And that 6th C is character. Well, credit is a form of character, too. Character simply means, when I'm sitting across the table from you, do I think you're going to pay me? Now, take this scenario here. You're a new entrepreneur. You're excited about your business. You want to talk about the future and the prospects. The guy sitting across the table from you is just thinking, is he going to pay me? So you've got one of those Mars and Venus things going on, you know? And you got to synchronize that, and you got to be careful how you do that. So I always tell my clients, look, I really don't want you going to a bank until I talk to you first. Because you walk into that bank down the street, like a client of mine did a few months ago, and burn your bridges, you can't walk into that bank a second time. Not on the same deal, anyway. So I want to talk to you first and see if I think that's the best bank for you to walk into. And second, what we're going to say to that banker when we get there to make them feel comfortable, particularly about that character issue, that you're the kind of guy who's definitely going to pay them back. So you look at all of this and you say, well, wait a minute, what about these SBA loans I keep hearing about? Right? Here's the story. SBA doesn't loan money. They only guarantee loans made by other people, which means you got to find other people. Now, the story in Tallahassee is this. Most of the national banks here in Tallahassee do SBA loans. We're talking Bank of America, BB&T, those kind of things. And when your paperwork comes in, they send it to a guy in North Carolina who is called an underwriter. And he credit scores you. He doesn't know anything about you except what's on that paper. And makes a yes or no decision and communicates that down here. And if the answer is an SBA loan, we've just put another layer on top of that. What is the layer? The layer is we've got to send the paperwork to SBA and ask SBA if this meets their requirements. Okay, SBA's got some requirements on collateral. They particularly like cash flow. And if they like what they see, they'll extend a guarantee back to the bank. And that guarantee under current law is equal to up to 90% of the total loan through the end of April, by the way. It's been extended 3 times that I know of. And SBA will charge a fee for that guarantee, and that fee could be equal to as much as 3% of the loan. I've had clients pay about $15,000 to $20,000 in fees. That comes off the front end. Under current legislation, that fee is waived until the money runs out. It's run out 3 times so far. So we keep getting like 1-month extensions on that. Now, if that happens that way, then you still have to negotiate the interest rate and the repayment terms with the bank, because if you pay careful attention here, the SBA has never put any money into this deal. You're still dealing with the bank's money. So the bank gets a voice of that. Now, I mentioned the national banks do SBA business and have SBA underwriters. The non-national banks located in our area, only 2 participate in the SBA program. Why? That's a choice the bank makes. We actually have a bank in our community that did an SBA loan a few years ago. SBA did not honor the guarantee. They said the paperwork was deficient, so that bank was out of the program and never will be back in. So we do have a couple of banks here that do them because they're very specialized loans. I've never made an SBA loan in my life. I've helped people make SBA loans, but I'm not a loan officer. And yet loan officers call me and ask me how this program works. So that tells me it's very specialized. Okay? So that's the way the SBA program works. And for example, and also it might be of interest to you that if you're located outside of Tallahassee, I mean you want to develop in a rural community, for example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has a very similar loan program that guarantees loans out of those areas. And I think it's a very nice program. We do have one bright spot in our SBA lending community here. We do have the largest SBA loan originator in the state, headquartered in Tallahassee, for a particular type of loan called the 504 loan. 504 loans are for when you want to put hard assets in place, buildings, equipment, that sort of thing, not for working capital. And that's a very favorable program. It's one of my favorite programs, actually. And if you need to know more about it, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Okay. All right. So at this point, you've done your feasibility study. You've figured out this idea makes some sense. You've figured out how you're going to get some money if you do it. Now you're into actually doing it. Okay. You're going to have to establish a legal entity with the Florida Secretary of State. Only one situation you don't have to go visit them first. And by the way, since we're in Tallahassee, I actually do go visit them. I've had two situations now where people thought they had set up a legal entity, but the paperwork had rejected, and therefore they hadn't, and they didn't know that. So we actually like to go down to the Secretary of State's office in the Kroger Center off Appalachian Parkway and hand them the paperwork, and they take a quick look at it, and that's just an extra level of insurance. One situation where you don't have to do that is when you are establishing a sole proprietorship where your full legal name is in the name of the business. Okay? Remember, we're in a sunshine state. We can't hide things in Florida like perhaps you can in other states. Everything has to be out in the sunshine here. So if I want to know who owns a business, I can determine that in a matter of a few seconds. And if I need to sue that person, I know exactly where to deliver the paper. Very open about that. In other states, Nevada, for example, that's a state secret. Okay, so you're going to have your full legal name and the name of your business, and it's a sole proprietorship, Chris Workman Plumbing Company. I don't need to go visit the Florida Secretary of State. I've made the disclosure in the name of my business, and it's a sole proprietorship. But if I wanted to call this sole proprietorship Workman Plumbing Company, now I got to visit the Secretary of State's office, and I got to purchase what's called a fictitious name. And that's a document that tells anybody that Workman Plumbing Company is owned by Chris Workman, and if you want to find him, here's where you go find him. And I pay $50 for 5 years, and I get absolutely no rights in the name. They don't care if there's 10,000. All I've done is met Florida's requirement to disclose the identity of ownership. So that's the only situation where I have the sole proprietorship with my name in it that I do not have to visit the Florida Secretary of State's office. Step number 2, we actually do them in this order, by the way. Leon County has waived their business license for 2010, 2011, let's check back later. City of Tallahassee does have a business license, which by the way now are not called occupational licenses or business licenses anymore. They're typically called business tax receipts, certificates, because that's what they are. So you will have to go down and chat with the folks at the Renaissance Center, very nice people. They will ask you some questions that will show a lot of interest in your business, and the fee will probably be $45, but it can be different. You're going to need to register with some tax authorities. The Internal Revenue Service typically wants to do a little business with you. You're going to need to get a tax ID number from them, and maybe more. And if you're going to be selling products subject to sales tax, or you're doing something else subject to state taxes, you're going to need to register with the Florida Department of Revenue. That's going to be a $5 registration for you. There are only 2 services in the state of Florida that are currently taxed, by the way. Those are commercial cleaning and burglar alarm monitoring. So if you have either one of those 2 services, you would need to pay sales